presentation skills. So the focus on that session is more about how do you improve your general presentation skills, specifically in a classroom environment as well. So today we're focused on the virtual environment. So we're going to start, we're basically dividing this whole thing into 4 sections. The first one we're going to look at is the different sharing modes that you see over here. Which one do we use? When do we use it? Then we're going to look at how we maximize our screen and screen real estate. That, to a large extent, links quite in quite an important way with this side as well, the different sharing modes. Then we're going to get to the fun parts, I think, and this is where we use annotation tools like this one that I'm using right now. How do we use these tools, and what can we actually do with them? And then I think one of the most underutilized things that we have in all of them and in our various tools is participation interaction tools. What participation interaction tools can we use and how can we use them? You'll see that links up to this little thing here we've got at the bottom that hopefully you have joined by now. So just some context as well, those of you who are joining this session now, many of you in this session, I do recognize quite a few names. These are the facilitators, the people who are presenting a lot of these sessions for us across the district. So you might also recognize some of the names of joining other facilitator sessions, and you might be new to this whole thing as well. So it's great to have you on board. This is part of our upskilling of our facilitators, but it's also obviously open to anyone and everyone who wants to join the fun. We're going to talk about that at the end of the session as well. If you would like to get involved as a facilitator in our e-learning teacher professional development environment, how do you go about doing it? Who do you contact, and how do you take the first steps? Technically, you might not know it, but you are taking the first step right now. Right, so let's get on to it. So if you haven't joined Slido yet, please jump into Slido. You can do it it works specifically well on your mobile device. So if you've got your cell phone handy, I hope you have not joined the session on your cell phone. But if you have your cell phone handy, scan the QR code. You can also just enter the address slido.com and go to the number that you see over there. I'm just going to paste that in the chat for you as well if you want to access it that way. Right, so there is slido.com, and you just enter that number, and then you're going to join our Slido. If you're in, you can just hit the like button, upvote the question if you've gotten into the Slido. Okay, so one thing as we are joining the Slido that I do have to warn you about, because we are working with a lot of the facilitators, we are going to go pretty quickly in this session. Again, it is being recorded. You're welcome and really encouraged to go have a look back at some of the stuff afterwards if you missed one or two things. But we've got quite a lot of things that we'd like to try and get through in not that much time. Right, so you'll notice with Slido, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on, that that at this point in time, there's just a simple part where you can actually ask questions. This is a question. Am I the only one that puts Slido on my second screen on my desk? I like that. Wonderful if we've got 2 desks running. But you'll notice now the next minute Slido is going to change into our first question. So we first want to talk, the first thing we're talking about today is screen sharing. How do you normally share your screen? You've got 3 options. Let's see what people tend to do. When you share your screen, how do you share your screen? Right, share the whole screen, share a window. Got 3 votes so far. We've got some people sharing tabs, that's great. Sharing the whole screen. So hopefully some gears are also going about what you're seeing on screen, thinking to yourself, this is a useful way to get some interaction going. You'll notice as well, we've got a couple of people that are interacting already. 7 people have joined in already, sharing the whole screen, sharing a window. Seems to be quite even. So I reckon that's about what would that be? 331, 332. We've got 26 people in the session. Let's see if we get some more votes in. Right, yes. So let's look at the different modes that we can share our screens. And we're actually going to go into detail into looking at how these different modes act and what you can do. Because I think ultimately what often happens is when we get to screen sharing, we tend to share the whole screen. A lot of us, this is basically where it all started for us. Let's be honest, when the whole online virtual meeting thing started and we needed to come to terms with what's going on, we just shared the whole screen because, well, it's frankly the easiest of the lot to do. Just want to quickly make this a little bit bigger. It's a bit small. So we kind of started out with sharing the whole screen, which is fine. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. But as Louis has pointed out, there's always this issue of sharing the whole screen that it's not, it could, what are we actually not showing? Then, of course, there's the other option where we share a window. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail and what that is. Some of you might not know what the difference between these two are. Then we get to the share a PowerPoint live. This is something that we don't really use, and definitely in terms of virtual facilitation, the kind of facilitation that we do in the e-learning space, we don't really use the live desktop mode because we can't jump into something else, and that's a bit of a problem. But it's important to understand what it is, I suppose. And then last but not least, we share a tab, which many people don't actually even know about, because the important part, what you also need to note is when we want to share a PowerPoint live, this is only on the desktop app. And when I say that, Teams is constantly changing. So for all that I know, it's already changed. And sharing a tab, this I know for a fact, is only available if you're using the web app of Teams. Now, just out of curiosity, what kind of sharing do you think I'm using at this point in time? If you look at my screen, you can just type it in the chat. What do you think I'm using? Tab? Any other guesses? Whole screen? Right. So the important part about the screen sharing, before I reveal what type of screen sharing I'm using, is no, it's not a, there's no such thing as right. Anyway, so the important part about screen sharing is exactly what this little dude on this side is doing. That is exactly a picture perfect version of what I look like, by the way. And that is to think about the sharing that you're going to be doing. What is it that you want to achieve? What is it that you want to display? Remember, we have to be mindful of the fact that whatever we're sharing on our screen automatically gets smaller and condensed when it is displayed on my participant screen. So the general rule of thumb is we want to make things as clear and visible as possible, but we need functionality within that. So at this point in time, what I'm doing is, because I need to show you a whole bunch of pretty complicated things, the only option that's going to work for me is sharing my whole screen. But there's a big advantage that I have, and that is I've got 2 screens. I've got my laptop on the one end, and then I've got a second screen that I can share. That means that over here, you don't have to see this part of what's going on. There's my my Teams meeting, which is signed in using the Edge browser, and I don't have to show you that. I can put it on my other screen, and it isn't visible. The disadvantage that we have, however, and the problem that we find ourselves in is not all of us are in a position that we've got two screens. So what do we do if that is the case? Now, I want to first take us through the different modes that we've got. Over here, what you see in front of you, this is Teams, desktop Teams that's already been logged in. Now, when we share, when we want to log in, you'll see, or when we want to share our screen, there's always the option over here, share. It's pretty much the same in the desktop or in the web version, with one important difference that we're going to look at now. So I click on share. It opens up my different options, and we'll see over here I've got the options of the screen that I can share. I can share my window. I can share Microsoft Whiteboard, which is a very, very, very powerful tool that you can explore in a classroom environment. I know a lot of teachers who really enjoy Microsoft Whiteboard. And then lastly, we've also got the option of PowerPoint Live. Here's Excel Live as well. I'll be honest, I've never gone into Excel Live. I'm imagining it's very similar to PowerPoint Live in that it has a couple of cool functionalities within it. So what I'm not really going to go into too much detail is the screen sharing part. What you will see with screen sharing, because I've got two screens, I can actually pick either I use screen 1 or I use screen 2. In my instance, this becomes quite useful. It does have its drawbacks, but it means that, like Louis pointed out, it's easier to hide the stuff that you don't want other people to see necessarily. Because you share your secondary screen, you drag your things onto that. It is also quite useful in that what I could now potentially do is I've got a little notepad over here that I've got notes on. So I can have windows on the one screen and just drag them in one by one as I need to access them. So that's a pretty useful thing that you can do as well. The parts that I want to focus on a little bit more now are these other parts that we can use. The one that we're not going to delve into now in detail, the PowerPoint Live over here, there are a couple of advantages to PowerPoint Live. One of those advantages is if other people that are joining your session are using Microsoft accounts, then all the links that you embed into your presentation. So if you've got different links in your presentation, let's say, for example, you've got a link that to the attendance register, they become clickable links. So that's a very cool trick to be able to use. Having clickable things on other people's screens and having a presentation with links on that people can then click on, and you have control of that presentation. So that's pretty useful. Another trick that it has built in is you've got the option of having someone else or of giving control to the participants so they can move through the presentation at their own pace. That's also a useful trick. Unfortunately, within our space, the e-learning professional development space, most of what we tend to show is cannot be shown on just a PowerPoint. We want to go into the tools, we want to explain the tools and delve into them in more detail. So for that reason, unfortunately, we don't use PowerPoint Live all that much, but it does have definite benefits in certain contexts. It's about thinking about which one do you want to use and what are you going to use. Right, now, let's look specifically at screen sharing now for a second. So if we select screen sharing as an option, so I'm going to select screen sharing. What's now happening is my entire screen is being shared. Everything that is shown on it will be shared, including when I go into my chats, when I go into all sorts of also when my Teams displays, etc., etc. So everything is going to happen. This is not ideal if we're working on a one-screen setup. So if you're working on your laptop or if you're working on your desktop, you've only got one monitor, it is not ideal because we don't really want our facilitators to be switching between a presentation and the chat to check what's going on in the chat. Again, I'm fortunate. I've got two screens, so I don't have to. So I can switch between the two. I can keep my eye on the one, and it works perfectly fine. Something that other people have done in the past, they'll use their mobile devices, just join the session, monitor the chat on their cell phone so that they don't have to jump between the two. And ideally, we would prefer that sessions are presented by a facilitator and a co-facilitator. Right. So the advantage of screen sharing is it's kind of a foolproof type of thing, because you know that whatever I see on my screen, you will see on your screen. It is, in that sense, probably the safest way of sharing, but it's definitely not the most effective way of sharing. So I think, um, again, this is usually the first exposure people have to screen sharing. In the instance that I'm doing it now, I have to show you multiple tools. So I'm actually, in this one session, I'm not showing only one window. I'm showing you over there, we've got Microsoft Teams open. Over there, we've got PowerPoint that I need to show you something about. Here, we've got my view board. Here, I've got Chrome that's got a bunch of stuff open. So I'm actually going to be talking about all those different windows. And if I talk about multiple windows, I have to use my share a screen. I cannot use the share the window. So again, if I take a session, for example, the session on um, the Google Fundamentals 1, where we look at how to use Chrome, same with the Microsoft orientation. If it's about the tool, the window itself, you won't see the option screens, etc. The key thing is thinking about what it is that we're doing, and not just doing it because we know it is the foolproof way of doing it. Right. So now we're going to go and we'll have a look at the second type of sharing, which is window sharing. So if I share content and I go to window, you'll see I've actually have 12 different windows open. Now, this is the part where it becomes specifically useful. If I click on window, it's going to, just take this away. There's a long list of all the different windows that I actually have open on my end. Now, again, as was pointed out, if I've got a whole bunch of stuff, dodgy things in here that I don't want people to see, the advantage of sharing my window is once I pick a window, so typically the way that I would use it is I would open up a bunch of tabs in my browser. So in this instance, Google Chrome. Right, so I'd use Google Chrome. Over here is my Google Chrome. That means that everything that happens in that window will be visible and will be shared. The rest will not be shared. So no one will see what is happening in my other parts. This is specifically useful when it comes to our browsers because we use tabs. Remember, one window shares multiple tabs. So that's the trick behind that. Now, let me show you quickly what happens in that. In this instance, let me just get the scratching out of the way. So I'm sharing my slide, or sorry, over here, I've now chosen to share my my window. Now, all that they're seeing is my window. You'll see there's also a red line that goes here. If you see that little red line over there, what that also means, and I prefer this. This is one of the things. It's just a pet hate of mine. I don't want to see people's start bars when I am in a virtual session. I want to see the. I actually want to see the only want to see the presentation itself, right? I like what Louis is also pointing out. Very important that we actually mention this to attendees, that it's a good idea to change the view options in your thing to full screen, so that there's as little noise as possible around that can be distracting from what we're doing. Now, the cool part is, even though I'm using window sharing, it doesn't limit me to only showing this, because I can jump into another one. As you can see, there is a little bit of inception happening. And I can jump into the different virtual presentation modes that I'm using, etc., etc. I don't want to get too far ahead. I can open up a new tab. I can explore that new tab, etc., etc. So this is the advantage of using this. And all that they see is the red line that you see running around there. Now, the last type of sharing that I want to show you, that we need to, or that we can use, I'm just going to stop this one quickly, is a mode of sharing called tab sharing, which I think is a totally underutilized mode of doing it, of sharing our screens. Something we really, really need to start delving into a lot more. The one thing about it is you cannot, when it comes to sharing over here, if I click on share, you won't see that option, because what I'm doing here is I am actually on on the desktop version of Teams. You have to use the web version of Teams. So if I just minimize that quickly, I've got a tab open over here, which is the web version of Teams. You'll notice if you've never used it before, it looks very, very similar to the desktop version of Teams. It's got a couple of different functionalities, but it's essentially the same thing. What you can also do, and I'm not going to go into delving into that part, just simply because I haven't added that in a while, but you'll see over here I've actually got a web app installed. So that is the web version of Teams, not the desktop version of Teams that you see over there. That's the worst error I've drawn in a long time. So there's that one that is not open at the moment is actually the web version of Teams. So you don't have to have it open in a tab. You can also have it open in a separate window if you prefer that. Over here, we've got the desktop version of Teams. And then over here, I've actually got the web version of Teams open in a tab. Does that all make sense? I know that can be a little bit confusing, but you can open Teams in many different ways. To make it even more confusing, I've got another version of Teams open there in my Edge tab. But anyway, let's not get too carried away with it, all of this. This is just to be able to showcase this thing. So just to give you a sense of the thinking that goes behind it, for me to be able to showcase what I wanted to showcase in this session, I had to understand I needed to open up Teams in another tab. So, or in some way that it's out of the way. So over here, I've got it open. I've got Teams open in Edge, which is actually displaying on my other screen. So I'm able to watch the chat. I see that John has just said, window sharing, and Louis talked about the viewing options, and I can see we've got the number of participants we've got in. So I can see that. But what I also wanted to be able to showcase to you is I needed to be able to showcase both the Windows, the desktop version of Teams, which is over there, and I needed to be able to showcase a web version of Teams. So it's about thinking carefully how we present and how we display. But as I said, the last thing that I wanted to show you with regards to presenting, very useful trick. If I've got it open in web, my Teams I've got open in web, and I click on share, and I go to share windows or tab, you'll see they've got different options over here now. You've got Chrome tab, which is a new one. You've got Windows, a window, and you've got your entire screen. So you can still do the window sharing and you can still do the entire screen sharing, but now you've got the option of doing tab sharing, which I think is incredibly useful. So if I click on that and I share the tab, let's see what happens. Okay, so now if we pay careful attention to what's going on here, you'll see there's now a blue line that runs from there all the way around. Okay, can you see the blue line? I know it's probably looks a little bit terrible now, but that means that is the part that is being displayed. I've taken away even more of the noise. And the great part is if I've opened up multiple tabs at the top, I click on this tab and you'll see I now have these options over here. Stop sharing, of course, but I've got that option. Share this tab instead. In other words, my participants will not see what's happening on this tab. It gives me a minute or two to just set things up. So if I tell them, have a look at this, blah, 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 explain something, I switch to a different tab and I check out something. Or I switch back to my Teams tab and I have a look at the chat, what's happening in the chat. Obviously, there's nothing happening in this chat. All the while, when I'm switching around, all that they're seeing is they're seeing this appearing in front of them. Now, when it comes to the tab sharing, and now we're moving into like the second part, where it comes to the full screen presentation mode that we want to do. When it comes to tab sharing, when we've got presentations running, there's a couple of cool little tricks that you need to understand in order for it to work effectively. So I'm first going to show you how it works in I first want to show you how it works in slides, because it's a little bit easier in slides. Then I'll show you how it works in PowerPoint as well. Well, yes, Johnny, a decent computer is going to be quite important. The connection itself is not going to have too much of a. Johnny just asked a question about if you present using two screens and multiple tabs, etc. Would you need a good connection and a good computer? The thing is, if you've got multiple team sessions open like I do, which is very abnormal to have, then the connection plays a role. If it's not that, then your connection shouldn't be a particularly significant thing because it's still only sending out one physical image, or regardless of the number of tabs. But the more stuff you've got open on your computer, the obviously the more draining it becomes on your system. So lots of tabs, lots of RAM. That's one of the basic things that I've always looked at. So in general, try and close things that aren't necessary when we're presenting. The more clutter, the more confused you get, the more confused your participants get, the more likely they are to miss out on what we're actually trying to get to. Right. So if I'm working in slides, for example, and I want to present this thing. So the second that I hit the present slideshow button, it's going to go into full screen mode. I don't really want full screen mode because I want to be able to shift between tabs. So don't hit the slideshow mode. You'll see there's a little arrow next to it over there. If we click on that and we go into presenter view, it opens up this little extra screen, which we can use if we want to, and it shows us what's happening. Remember, we are sharing a tab, so our participants will not see this window. This will not show up on their end. They will only see what's happening over here without the red cross, of course. And that means I can easily present this. It looks very good. It looks nice. I've got my welcome screen, for example, in this session. And while I've got my welcome screen, I can go on and I can go browsing. I can do whatever. I can go check out different stuff that I need to check out. I can go get my links ready. All the while, the only thing that's showing is this screen. And whenever I want to switch to something else, I've opened up a new tab. I just click share this tab instead. You'll see the blue line has now moved. The blue line is now wrapped around this presentation. So suddenly, again, it works very well. The tab browsing. If you, for example, are presenting a session on, let's say, Google Forms, then you've got your presentation, and you've got your Google Form, and you have something else. You've got another screen that you can browse. Then it's very nice to be able to switch between these things in this mode. When we're on PowerPoint, it's a little bit different because PowerPoint's default mode, it doesn't have that present kind of the other present mode that it has. So when you're doing PowerPoint and you say present, play from beginning, it will go into full screen mode, right? So this thing is going to go into full screen mode. Now it's not playing along. Okay, so there's the answer. Don't use that one. But what I found, the same trick that you can use for many of these things that go into full screen mode. The minute you use Control Tab is your shortcut key to switch between different tabs. So if something does go into full screen mode, so let's say this has now gone into full screen mode, my slideshow, I don't want it to be in full screen mode. Then the minute that I use Control Tab, it actually switches to a different mode. Right, which brings us to that full screen kind of viewing thing that we also talked about. If you are using screen sharing, so let's just stop this one quickly. As you can see, my computer is not super wild about what I'm doing with it at this point in time, because again, not a normal setup at all. If I do use this window sharing, right, and I'm going to do window sharing on my on this one, and I am over in this presentation. This one of the important keys that you can use, and it actually works for a lot of different things, is the F11 button. Full screen mode, F11, right? It'll take you to full screen mode in many different things, but often it also takes you out of full screen mode, which you then I've gone from my full screen mode to my different mode. So again, sharing, thinking about how we share, thinking about the way that we're going to do it. The best, I think, for a lot of what we are doing is to use the mode where we are going to share a tab, not a new tab, right? Yes, we'll get to that now, Lou. It's a good thing to add on. Right, so here I'm sharing my tab. I use my presenter view when I'm sharing my tab so that I can actually have a full screen view for the participant, but still have access to everything else. I can then go to different tabs. So let's say I am doing something on Google Forms. So now I've opened up my new tab. And then another thing that Louis also pointed out that's quite useful is the show hide bookmarks. But again, when we're using the tab sharing, it doesn't really have an impact on what we're doing, but Control-Shift-B is your shortcut key for show hide bookmarks. I always try to hide the bookmarks. Again, it just cleans up what I am showcasing and what I am presenting. So the bottom line, again, as I said, is it's all about thinking about the way people are going to receive the presentation. Right. So are we are you all still with me? Are you all still following along? Should we just take a quick breath after all of that? Yes, John, let me just quickly give you permission to, oh, is that just did you want to? Right, John, you can, yes, unmute yourself. Oh, okay, perfect. Right. So we're all still with us. Let's go on and move on to the next part of what we wanted to look at. So stop sharing there. Right. So improved viewing. Now, I'm not going to go into detail with presenter mode because really we have to be at this point in time. We cannot still show people PowerPoints like that. We have to make sure that when we show PowerPoint, we click on the slideshow button. On that note, this reminds me of something that's quite important that people also tend to forget. When I want to share my slideshow and I want to share the slideshow window, PowerPoint does a funny thing that makes it a little bit tricky sometimes to share the way that we want to. So I just want to show you this quickly. If I click on slideshow in PowerPoint, what's actually happening if I hover over my PowerPoint icon over there? Have a careful look at what's actually happening. It has now created 3 separate windows. There's one window, which is the editor window. There's one window, which is the presentation. And then there's one window, which is the presentation, what would you call it? Presenter view. Right. So PowerPoint makes it a little bit tricky if you're going to do it this way around and forces you almost to do whole screen sharing. Because a lot of people, when they share PowerPoint, what happens is they will share this window, the editor window, first, and then they will hit the present mode button, and then it doesn't go into their PowerPoint. So please keep that in mind. The minute you click on slideshow, so you'll see now I've only got the one window open, but the minute I click on slideshow, what's actually happening is we've got 3 different windows running. We've got our editor window, we've got our presentation itself, and then we've got our presenter view. So the presenter view, just to show you what that looks like, that's my presenter view. And on a side note, this is just completely unrelated. This is also something that causes a lot of headaches when it comes to the use of the e-beam and other interactive devices. Because the e-beam, or most interactive devices, will track what's going on your main screen, which is usually going to show your presenter view. So it actually shows up what's happening here. So now you are pressing with your e-beam pen, but unfortunately, while you think you are pressing on the little arrow, what you're actually doing is you're pressing somewhere entirely different on this presenter view. There's a very easy fix to this if you ever find yourself in that position. If you go here to display settings, all that you need to do on display settings is you say duplicate slideshow so that it actually shows the slideshow on both screens. Then you will be able to use your interactive tools correctly. If you don't do that, it often gives lots of headaches in terms of the way that it's being used. Right. So I hope that's just a random little other trick that's going to help you. My computer's going a little bit crazy here for a second. Just give it a minute or two to try and recover from that trauma. Right. So presenter mode, really, really important thing that we need to use. Sorry. Okay. Then the next thing that we need to understand is viewing in full screen mode. It's a really important thing as far as possible. Whatever you show to people, try to show it to them in as full screen mode as possible. I'm not going to go into detail with this. Louis is presenting a session next week, Tuesday, where he's going to go through. Shame my computer's now really gone crazy with that. Where he's going to go through some of those things, how you actually go into full screen mode in Word, in PDF, in PowerPoint, in all those things. I hope Louis knows how to do all these things. So, yes. Right. So again, as Louis pointed out, it messes with a lot of things that thing. So the duplicate way of doing PowerPoint works quite well. Again, it's two tasks. Whatever you need it for, if you want to see your presenter view and you want to see your notes and you know what you're saying, then that becomes a different story. Then zooming in and zooming out, right? So zooming in and zooming out is always a useful trick to be able to do. And in certain instances, it works very well. So let's just take, for example, Google Forms. I've opened up this little page. I need to talk about a Google form. Let's just open this one as an example. I don't think there's anything too suspicious about that. But this is quite nice. The minute that I'm showing it to them and I need to illustrate something, here I've zoomed in quite intensely into this thing. So it becomes easier for me to show these tools that I have over here, right? Showcasing them becomes a lot easier the minute that I've zoomed in on something. And then that full screen mode that we talked about, hit F11, full screen, suddenly I've taken away the clutter and I can really focus on what I need to focus on. Right. And zooming in and zooming out in your browsers, very easy. Hit Control plus minus, or mouse wheel does the same trick. And then there's different ways. But again, being mindful of it is really the most important part of what one needs to do. Just being aware of what it is that you are looking for. And now here comes a bit of a trick, and maybe someone has a cool trick for me when it comes to making your cursor bigger. Because there's maybe, let's see, you can give me some feedback on this, because what I've found, there's a simple trick that you can use in your classroom environment. If you've just got your computer plugged into your data projector, that'll show up perfectly fine. And that is just go into your Windows settings and change your cursor. So you'll just hit the start button, you just type cursor, and then you'll see there's an option that says change mouse pointer size. Select that, and I can make it sillily big, and there's my enormous cursor. Now the question is, are you seeing an enormous cursor on your end? Right, so the cursor on your end might be yellow, but it has not changed in size. So you have to understand that is one of the things about this. Even though I'm using my screen sharing, I'm using my desktop sharing, and it should be the same thing as displaying for everyone. In terms of this, it doesn't actually do that, right? So it does not send a bigger picture to the other side. This works well in a classroom environment, as I said, because now just plugging it in, there's an HDMI cable it runs to, or I'm connecting wirelessly, it will display your biggest one. But when it comes to sharing across the internet, when I'm sharing my screen, it doesn't send a bigger image. It doesn't actually change it. So that becomes it doesn't actually work. Right, so we'll just change it back because it's futile and it's the same thing that it was before. Now, when it comes to browsing, and again, keep this in the back of your mind because there is a part at the end where we're going to give you the option to give us some ideas. When it comes to browsing on browsers, and I'm using Chrome now, but these are not based on any browser specifically. You can allow Chrome extensions to be installed on Edge. You can allow them to be installed on Firefox, I think. You can allow them, most browsers will allow you to use extensions. So there's a nice little extension. I'll send you the link to this extension that you can use called Custom Cursor for Chrome. Right? If you want to find it, you literally just go open up a new tab, Custom Cursor for Chrome extension. Let me just zoom out a bit. That's a little bit over the top. So there's Custom Cursor for Chrome. I'm going to click on it. I'll just paste the link in the chat now. It's an incredibly simple and incredibly easy to use tool. Copy, paste. There you go. There's the link to it. And all that it does, this Custom Cursor for Chrome, is if I click on my extension and I open up my Custom Cursor for Chrome, it gives me a whole bunch of different things that I can select. Now, I usually just go for the yellow one, and I can also change the size of it. So on your end, you should see a big cursor now. Right? Does it show a big cursor on your end this time? Maybe a bit too big. Right. So very simple, very easy to use cursor that's going to work. The big thing about it is when I move this thing onto certain things, there it's fine. There's a little hand that's displaying. But when I move it out of Chrome, it goes back to the small one. So this is specifically, and you'll see where I've got a new over here in certain windows, it's not actually going to pick up the bigger cursor. That's the best one I've come across so far because for most of what we do, I'll have a presentation. There it works on my presentation. And then over here, it works on my tool that I'm using. If I'm explaining Quizlet, if I'm explaining quizzes, if I'm explaining forms, I don't know why I'm stuck in all sorts of forms things, it works very well in a browser-based environment. This one. The other trick, I've seen lots of people use it. It doesn't actually work. We need to be mindful of the fact that it doesn't work. It does work for certain screen recordings. It does work for a number of things. It's not going to work if you record yourself in Teams, of course, but it does work in certain ones. And yes, Johnny, thanks for sharing another option for us. Cool animated cursors. I haven't looked at all the stuff. I suppose I'm a little bit boring in that sense that I found this one. It works for me. I usually have it about half the size, I think, something like that. And I just picked the yellow one because yellow stands out nicely against most backgrounds. So, right. Okay. So we'll get to all your suggestions in a second. I like it. I'm hoping I'm going to have lots of cool new ideas coming out of this session as well. Right. So making your cursor bigger, useful, very, very useful trick that you can use. Then now we're going to get to some of the more interesting parts of what we can use. Audience interaction tools, right? So why is this thing gone out of this now? Sorry. It's because I'm popping in and out the whole time. Apologies. Now it's not playing along. Right, so audience interaction tools. Let's go check on Slido again. Have you ever used audience interaction tools? So your own definition of audience interaction tools is what you want to call it. Whatever that is, you've never used it. I used it all the time. once or twice. We've got a nice healthy spread. Never used it. All the time, once or twice. 4 votes. Here's another interesting question. This Slido thing that we've had has been open the whole time, and you could have asked questions on it the whole time. We haven't used the opportunity, but it's been there the whole time. Now, just while we're talking about this audience interaction tools, right, so the poll in the chat, Mana, this is a bit of a tricky one because when we want to add the polls on the chat, I'm still a little bit in two minds whether it always works or doesn't work. And I think it's something we need to test a little bit more extensively, because the polls sometimes exclude people from responding if they haven't logged in with a office account. Your account, as an example, having logged in as the guest, Marna Beat's guest account, would not actually see those polls. Which is always a bit of a problem. But I think this is something we need to explore a little bit more, because we haven't really done it as much as possible. Right, cool trick there that Easton's got as well. I like the flickering circle when pressing control. It gives an indication where the audience should focus to make active in Windows additional mouse settings. Right, I'm definitely going to go check out that. But as I said, Marna, the poll that we include in Teams is a great tool, definitely. But unfortunately, it does all sorts of funny things, especially when people are not joining with official office accounts. When they're joining with the WCG schools accounts, when they're joining with other office accounts, when they're joining with Western Cape accounts, then it works very well. But other than that, we are in a position that we need to be a little bit more creative when it comes to these things. So it's great just asking questions like I'm doing now. Technically, I think most of you have done that as well. But Slido is a perfect example of that audience interaction tool that we have. So here we can see we've got 15 people, we have the 12 people that have responded. So you'll see over here, over here I've got 12 people who have responded. 75% of you have said you've never used audience interaction tools. 70% have said once or twice. 8% has said all the time. I'm assuming that 8% is one person. Who is that one person? Are they brave enough to say, or do they want to share their thoughts with us now, or maybe towards the end? Which tools they're using? Because remember, ultimately, the key thing is we are ultimately trying to learn from each other. So if there's someone who's using a lot of tools all the time, that's great. That's wonderful. We need to share ideas. We need to find out what's going on. Right. So Hannah, let me just quickly allow your mic. Hannah, your mic is allowed, so you can unmute yourself and talk.
But Yaku, I've seen all your presentations, so I know what to do. I do the slido.com, I use the Jamboard, I use the quizzes, and that encourages a lot of interaction and constant feedback. So I'm doing your things.
Okay. There are other things as well. Hannah, just out of curiosity, are you doing it in a classroom environment as well, ever, or only when
yeah, we did. So we don't have cell phones per se, but I did it the other day when we were teaching. When I taught counting in tens, we did a little quiz thing with them, and they all had the pen and they had a turn to answer questions and stuff. That was more of a substitution for quiz, but it really had them. It got the grade ones really interactive with this thing and with the whiteboard, and they were very excited. So more of those kind of things, because we do not have learner devices at school.
Okay. But I think what's valuable in what Hannah's sharing there as well is there's a lot of the tricks and the skills that we are learning through this virtual facilitation that are implementable at a school level as well. And again, a lot of it is just about thinking a little bit more carefully about what we are doing and not just doing it the same way we've always done it. So the challenge is to explore these things, because I'm not going to show you how Slido works specifically now. It is a little bit more complicated. I know we had a session on this exact same, or this basically the same session roughly 6 months ago, where we said we'll look into setting up a session explaining how Slido works. We haven't gotten to that yet, but I think there's a lot of value in what we are doing in Slido. It keeps people engaged more than they would have otherwise been. So let's look at some audience interaction tools that we could potentially use. So Slido is one of them. Now you've been experiencing Slido throughout the session. It's a very simple kind of tool in the sense that it allows you to insert. And what I like about it is it allows me to actually insert these questions into my presentation. So I don't need to break out anywhere else. I just go on with my presentation and I get to one of the Slido parts and that thing pops up. And on your mobile device, if you keep your cell phone open, whenever I move to a question, you'll notice if you check your phone now, right now, the minute that I go back to the poll, it switches to the poll. And then when I move away from the poll, it switches to the Q&A. So I quite like that. I think if we are in a situation, a scenario where we do have learner devices in our classroom, this is a great way to encourage kids to ask questions who would otherwise be a little bit hesitant to engage, who might be a bit hesitant to ask. So I think there's great potential and great value in a tool like this to get those anonymous questions going. Remember, at the moment, even now, what we're sitting with is we've got a chat. Everyone wants to ask a question. Their question will appear and we'll see who is asking a question. And people aren't always so keen on that. But now, the minute that you've got this option to ask questions anonymously, people become more keen to ask questions, right? And you've also got the option for people to upvote things, etc., etc. But I don't want to go into too much detail into that. I think it's a very good thing to go into for self-exploration, not that complicated. Then something like Mentimeter, where we've got our word clouds, where we have things like that, is always a nice way to engage your audience. Just simple things. How did you experience this? How did you experience that? I would have gone into a Mentimeter now as well, but again, there's quite a few things that I'd love to show you still. But Mentimeter has nice little elements built into it that you can just get that small audience engagement happening. As I said, things like a word cloud is a very effective conversation starter. Getting those keywords out. What are people thinking? What are people saying? Getting the testing ideas like we're doing now. How do you rank this? How do you rate that? Now, I had a general idea before presenting this, a general expectation of what the audience is likely to answer, but it's always good to have like a visual confirmation of that, of what your thoughts and your ideas on that was. So that's a great idea. Right, so there's Marna with an example using Mentimeter at the phase meetings to see what the staff are thinking. Remember, facilitation, virtual facilitation, yes, we're doing it online, but facilitation remains facilitation. I think these are incredibly important tools to use. Rather than just having people asking people, raise your hands, you do an online type of thing with them, because then people feel free to do it, because there's an anonymity involved, attached to it, that people often like to have, and then you can engage. Then we can do exactly what I had now. I had the one person who said that they use it all the time. So I asked, is there a brave soul who wants to tell us? I could have gone further and said, look, so there are 2 people who said they used it once or twice. Did you use anything else? Anything new? Anything different? And we'll get to that in a second or two. Right. Then Jamboard is another one. I think I'm just going to do things a little bit different in my presentation, because we're going to jump onto Jamboard at the end of this thing. If you haven't heard of Jamboard before, you'll see now what it's all about. It's about getting some form of interaction, some form of response from people that are attending your sessions, people that you're talking to, your learners in your classrooms, whatever the case might be. Then I added this one with a little asterisk, polls in teams. Now, I'm not opposed to this at all. I think it's a great thing if we can get this to work properly, that we have our polls added to the chat in Teams. because lots of people are keeping an eye on Teams. But what I do think is an advantage of using, for example, um, your Slido, Mentimeter, Jamboard, and other things is because over here we are going to probably do this on a computer, but over here we actually have the option to have a computer stay on my presentation, and then we use our mobile device. Um, we use our mobile device for these things. So you actually have a person watching the presentation, but still being able to interact with their cell phone. Now, I don't know if the same thing is happening in Teams, because look, it can be exactly the same thing in Teams. We've got people using their laptop to show the presentation, and we've got people using their their cell phone to check out the chat. That same thing can still be happening. I know that. So I think it's well worth exploring the polls and Teams, but you will have to explore it carefully. Test it out. Have your laptop on one end in a team session, your cell phone connected as a guest, and just check what happens so that you have an understanding of what it is, what's happening. It's the same thing as when we are testing out any kind of educational technology. We always need to try and have an understanding of what does the facilitator slash teacher slash whatever you want to call them, how do they experience it? How does the audience, the learner, the whatever experience it? So trying to figure out how we test it in that frame to have a better understanding of how it's actually going to react. So with the audience interaction, this is a session that we've planned that we're going to build on at a later stage to present to teachers as well, so that they've got a better sense of how we can use these tools to get interaction from our learners. And that includes some of the cool offline stuff that you can do. Clicker, I know Quizzes now has an offline solution as well, etc., etc. But it is well worth exploring. And whenever you are presenting something, I really encourage you to try and insert one or two of these things. It's also a good idea not to overwhelm people with trying to insert every single tool. And because every single thing that you do, there's like a moment of, okay, now people need to answer. Let's give them time to answer. Let's give them time to respond. So keep that in mind. Right now, what I want to do is I actually just want to jump to, I'm going to skip this other tools you can suggest, because now we're going to get to the, where's the, oh, there we go. This is actually where I wanted to get to. Right. Annotation tools. Now, I think this is one of the most underutilized things at the moment in our presentation, is using effective annotation tools. Right. We will, I'm going to share the QR code for the register at the end again. So let me just quickly copy and paste that into the chat. Right, so, okay, so there you go. There's the register and the ID key for the session. Now, when it comes to annotation tools, Teams has built-in annotation tools, which we can use when we are using our live presentation modes. But again, as we spoke about earlier, we're not likely to use it all the time. So we need to find different solutions for annotation tools. Now, you would have noticed throughout this entire session, I have been using annotation tools. I've got two little tools running over here. I've got this one that you can see over there. Maybe I should just quickly use their own annotation tool to annotate itself. So, so over here, I've got a thing called, I'm not even going to try and write it now, annotate.net. Right, so I'm just going to say a.net. Johnny, we will send you the recording for the part that you missed, so don't worry about that. So annotate.net, and over here I've got a thing called my viewboard. And you would notice that my writing is terrible because I'm actually doing all of it with a mouse. I do not have a stylus. I do not have an additional cool device that I can use to do this, which shows you that you can do it with a mouse. It is better, obviously, when you have a pen. It's better when you have the necessary tools, but you can do a lot with your mouse, and you actually learn to write reasonably well with it given time. So there we go. There I can write my own name. Right, and this all is done using a mouse. Now, if you're in a scenario at a school where you actually have a e-beam, as an example, or you've got a, now I've forgotten what the other ones are called, something similar to an e-beam, or you're sitting with a laptop that has touch capability or anything like that, then these things become absolutely critical for the way that you can present and for the way that you can teach in your classroom. So I want to just explore these two. And again, these are by no means the only tools out there. These are just two of the tools that I found works well. And again, they are free. I'm not paying for them with an asterisk. I'll explain that in a second. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention about the audience feedback tools that we're using. All of those tools are free that I showed you, but all of them have limitations in what they can do. Slido, for example, you can only have 3 questions in a presentation. Mentimeter, I think it's only 2 that you can do. So all of the free versions have quite restricting limitations, unfortunately. But if you've got a short session and you combine these things in different ways, you actually get away with not needing more than that necessarily, although more would be nice. Now, the annotation tools that I'm using over here, this one called annotate.net is used specifically for browser-based things. It works incredibly well for the simple reason that it is sticky. So in other words, if I were to change to a different slide, you'll see that it actually goes away. So let's say over there, here I've got screen sharing. Now I'm going to write on my screen sharing thing, and I'm going to move on. It does not stay on the screen. So that is incredibly useful. The fact that it is sticky on a web capacity, but it doesn't work on a desktop. So in other words, if you're opening up Word, if you're opening a PDF, if you're opening a PowerPoint, anything other than a browser-based thing, you can't use it. It is a browser-based tool. But it is great in that some of the great things you can do with it, for example, if I go to so now I'm just trying to think of what I wanted to show you. Let's use the digital skills classroom that many of you are participants in. So it's great because here I can actually write things in my classroom. There's my arrow, and now I can scroll. But you always need to be careful of how it acts. Some places it does exactly what you expect it to do. Other places it doesn't do what you want it to do at all. So this is a very useful thing to be able to use on websites to focus people's attention. And again, it is sticky. So here I'm writing on this one. If I move to my other tab, it does not come along with me. Here again, I can write, but now we'll see in Google Forms, it does not stick to the form. Now it stays on top of it, but it doesn't move to my other tab, which is great. If I'm using my view board, the other one that I'm showing you over here, and I scribble on things, what I'm doing is my view board just puts a layer on top of everything else. So it's going to move along with whatever I am moving to. It doesn't stick to the surface. It is great because both of them have very definite functionality. For example, my view board is great because I can write everywhere. You can see I can write over there. I can write in my start bar because it is literally creating a layer on top of everything on my screen. If I'm using annotate.net again, if I'm using annotate.net, then you'll see I can't write in any of the systems parts of things, right? So there, I can't get to that. Even if I open up a new tab and I want to show them, there's the waffle. Click on the waffle. I can't show them the waffle. I can't write on the home tab with annotate.net. You'll have to use different tools. So now suddenly I can use a different tool, and here I can illustrate the waffle over there. So again, it's a case of thinking about which one of these tools is the correct one and the appropriate one to use for whatever it is that you want to use. I want to show you. I'm first going to show you how exactly annotate.net works. It's really very straightforward. There's a link that I will share with you, and I've tested it. Annotate.net, again, it works on, it's a browser-based thing, so it works on other browsers as well. It's a Chrome store, but you can just add the Chrome Web Store to your different browsers. So if I actually go here to this address, and again, annotate.net can actually do a lot more than what I'm showing you. This is just the basic what we can write with annotate.net on our screen. So mine says remove from Chrome because I've already added it. Yours would probably say add to Chrome. Then you can just log in using your Google account, using your Microsoft account, using various different accounts. You can also create an account if you want to. And very important, this is the extension that we're adding, right? So we're installing this extension. And to access any of our extensions, over here, that little puzzle piece that we see there, and again, now I'm drawing with the other tool because annotate.net can't draw there. I click on that, and here are all my different extensions. I've got quite a few happening. Annotate.net is the one we're looking for. We click on that, and it gives me this little bar here that asks me show the toolbar, hide when minimized, etc., etc. So if I want to say show the toolbar, it's not going to show the toolbar on certain pages. So this kind of system type page, it doesn't show it over here. But the minute I get over here, there's my toolbar that I can play around with and that I can do various things with. So for example, if we wanted to go to something like Wikipedia, let's say whatever we want to do in Wikipedia. So here I've gone to Wikipedia. Let's test how annotate.net works over here. I'm going to draw a little circle, and then I'm going to scroll, and you'll see it sticks. They've got my highlighters, so there I can highlight whatever I want to highlight, and there it's going to stick there. So very useful if you need to show content. This is a great tool, I think, in a classroom environment as well. Now, again, if you're using something like an e-beam and you want to display things like this, incredibly useful tool. I used it when I was in the classroom. It is incredibly useful to be able to use to write on websites, to write on things like that, and then just click on the next tab and it doesn't come along. And I don't have to erase it. When I get back there, it's still there. Very, very, very useful tool. Important to understand with annotate.net that it is not entirely free. There's a free version of it. The free version of it is limited to black only, right? So you will only be able to write in black. You cannot use any of the colors. You also, I think you can adjust the size of it at least, and you can only highlight in the yellow color, that first yellow color. So you've only got that highlighter to work with. That's it. And again, you can make it bigger and smaller. That's the limitation of the free version. So I prefer the one that you can add color. It's not expensive. I think it costs $10 for the year, an annual license. So it really is about as expensive as your normal whiteboard markers would be. And then you've got that tool, right? Then the other tool that I'm using is this tool called My Viewboard over here. So I'm just actually going to close it first, because what My Viewboard actually is it is not just a screen annotation tool the way that I'm using it. It is a whiteboard tool. Right, so that's what it, okay. So this is what it actually looks like, My Viewboard. It is a whiteboard tool. It is actually an extremely powerful whiteboard tool that has tons and tons and tons of cool little features built in. Your normal kind of drawing things, but it's got all sorts of nifty little magic box things. You can add cameras to it. You can add objects to it. You can add maths tools. There's all sorts of stuff as well. It actually has audience participation tools built into it, but that's part of the paid for version, which I have not explored. But it really does have a lot of cool functionality within it, the viewboard itself. I haven't delved into it extensively, because the thing that I use it for, the minute that I open it up, there's a button over there, looks like the Windows button, and all that you need to do is you just need to click on that, and it'll create this little menu over here that floats around. And now from there, you've got access to your drawing tools on your desktop. So very simple, straightforward. That's the way I prefer to look for tools that are free and that are straightforward and easy to use to get the job done. And understanding when to use which one is a crucial part of when we are presenting. When do I use the My View board? When do I use annotate.net? Right. Are there any questions on that? Was that a bit quick? Will you be able to follow that and go and be able to explore that? Because there's not a lot to it, other than just getting the software and playing around with it. There's My View board, the link to My View board as well. And as I said, you're welcome. I really encourage you to explore the tool itself, because the tool itself looks very, very intriguing and very powerful as well, in terms of having a digital whiteboard. As I said, I haven't explored it because this is very much a classroom tool. So those of you who are in the position that you've got useful tools that could use this effectively, have a look at what you can do with it. I think it's a great addition to what to other whiteboard tools that are out there. And again, advantage, it's not free, but the free version has all the functionality built into it that we probably want to be able to use. Any questions? Does it make sense? We're all very quiet now. Well, we've been quiet the whole time because you're all muted. I'm sorry. Yes, Louis, let me just allow your mic. Okay, Louis, you can unmute yourself.
During part of this presentation, I've been adding extensions as they go on, but I'm not sure I like some of the permissions that some of these extensions necessarily like. I'm just slightly paranoid, so I'm also looking for other alternatives that might ask a different set of permissions. I wouldn't necessarily just install any extension that I think is cool. I would be slightly careful about what it asks to have access to. That's about it.
Yes. Now, look, I agree entirely with what Louis says. We tend to have that too quickly click allow. And that is not always the best idea. So far I'm quite comfortable with all of these ones that I've used so far. I haven't come across issues. I think with the annotate.net, one needs to explore a little bit more in depth with the additional tools, because it does require, or it asks for drive access and things like that, which is a little bit, one is always a bit hesitant to give that. So have a look at the tools and have a look at what they could do for you, but find tools that are going to get the job done. The key thing is we always find ourselves in a position where we need to find the things that are going to be able to help us improve what we're doing. It's something that we constantly talk about, is this whole virtual facilitation thing has been with us now for 3 years. And we have to ask ourselves, have we grown? Have we improved? Not just in confidence of the content, but in the ability to deliver the content. So the last thing that I want us to, the very last thing, and then we're going to wrap up. We might actually even get through this meeting and through all the stuff that I wanted to show you in the amount of time, which is going to be a miracle in itself. And that is, we're now completely the wrong part, and the feedback part from your end, right? So this is a Jamboard that I'm going to share with you as well. So please, there's the link for the Jamboard is in the chat. There's the QR code. Sorry, my thing is in the way. Are there other tools that you can suggest? Other tools that you are using, other tools that you found are useful? Please share those tools with us so that we can, and tell us about it, of course, so that we can so that we can also share in the information. Jamboard is always a bit of an interesting one. The first time, if people go onto it, they're not really sure what they're supposed to do, especially if they're joining it with a mobile device. But I think it's a very useful little tool that we can use, and something that I think we can promote a lot. I quite like it in a classroom environment as well, in terms of getting feedback. Google Form check-in. Well, that's always a good one. Just like a basic kind of, I'll switch to the Jamboard in a second, just as soon as more people have joined our session. Oh, let me just switch to the Jamboard now. Right, so lots of people on the Jamboard. Add your sticky notes, please. If you're not sure how Jamboard works, over here, there's the little sticky note icon. All that you do is you click on that sticky note icon. It allows you to create a new sticky note icon. This is the best sticky note. You can change the color to a pink one over here. And there I've added my little sticky note. Oh wait, now I changed into easy one, Google Form check-in. Sharing music in the background when I present, boring work. I hope that boring work is not aimed at this session. But I agree. I also like to have music happening. So it would be ideal in this instance if we had some music playing while people are trying to add some comments on here. Anything else? Word clouds, tools for interaction. Jamboard. Jamboard is always nice. So now I'm going to put people on the spot. Or let's see if I can put people on the spot. I'm slowly but surely turning on all your mics, so you all now have the option of unmuting yourself. The Google Form check-in. Ooh, did someone want to explain
That
what
was
they
me,
meant by the Google
Yaku.
Form? Yes, Anna, so how did you
Anna.
use your Google Form check-in?
Normally at the start of a session, okay, I'm talking now in presenter mode. When presenting a session, I would just check in with everyone, see how they're doing. But also, we've done in the past with parents, with a parent meeting when I had a whole bunch of parent meeting, and I had all the parents say, I just wanted to check where everyone was at. So then I just put a Google form check-in, and just to get the response from the parents and to see where they're at. Just a simple questions, and then from there I was able to host my parent meeting with the parents.
Okay, always great to have that. Whiteboard to take notes as people talk. I like that. Word cloud tools for interaction. Anyone who said that? Want to elaborate? We're going to test something now, by the way. Do you see a poll on your end?
Yes, I could vote in chat. That's pretty cool.
Right, there's only 2 responses. So if you see your polls, you need to respond to it quickly. 4 responses. So there we go. There's a little poll that we can do. It seems to work. Last time I tried it, it didn't work this way. Now it's working. I like it. Do you want to see how we did that?
Yes, definitely shows how you did that.
Okay, now I just need to try and remove it first. Okay, so if the poll works, I think it's a super useful thing to include. So let's show you how this works. The next time you can do it as well. So this is now me. This is our meeting that you can see. Everyone is talking, blah blah blah. So in order to get that done, over here we've got apps. So we're going to add an app. We say plus apps, and we type in at the top polls. Gives me that option, polls. I'll add poll, and I just say save. Don't worry about the permissions, Louis. I think it's okay. And here we've got our poll, and you'll see all that I did now is I actually used this this instant poll thing at the bottom, where I've got those options. So let's ask you a question. Did you find this session useful? There's my instant poll. Ish poll, instant-ish. There we go. Did you find the session useful? There we go. So the test now is going to lie with the part that I can't test, the part that you're going to have to test on your end is what kind of account do you need to use to do this? I suggest using your WCG schools accounts that you are able to log in because we know it's a Microsoft account. But part of this poll thing is we will be able to, I'm sure I'll be able to add other kinds of polls as well. So I'll be able to create a new poll. Let's see what the word cloud poll looks like. Right, there's a new poll. How do you feel about word? So yes, I think as I said, last time I tried it, it did not work nearly as smoothly and effectively as this. So this is definitely a tool we need to start integrating into our virtual facilitation. So I'm very glad we had a try. Nervous. There's no reason to be nervous. We're all trying to learn together, and I think it's important that we understand that concept, that we are all actually trying to learn together. So again, just adding the poll in Teams. If you're not sure how to do it, we simply go to this plus apps, we add polls, and from there you've got lots of options. Yes, Louis, you can unmute yourself.
There's another way to do it is when you've set up a meeting in Microsoft Teams, you actually go to the meeting, you edit, and then there's a plus button top right for all the different elements you can add. One of the elements is you can search for poll and add it, and then you can preset up all your polls outside of an actual meeting. And then in your meeting, you choose which ones you just want to roll with at that moment. So
yes,
that's the way to just do it beforehand.
It is a safer way to do it. I think in terms of the setup, often it's a little bit tricky because the way in which we do our virtual facilitation. So we might need to. I very much like what I like about this polls is I like this instant reaction part that we've got here at the bottom, where you can ask people a question and they can just quickly hit the heart, hit the like, hit the. I think it adds a lot of audience interaction to what we're doing. I'm going to be completely honest. This is not the prettiest word cloud I've ever seen. I think the Mentimeter stuff is quite a bit prettier, but it's a very effective and easy place. And what I think is very, very cool is we've almost got a full response from the entire set of participants, which is something we struggle a little bit more with other tools. So that's the end of my story. Thank you very much for attending this session. I hope it has been insightful. I hope it's going to help you become a better virtual facilitator. And very importantly, I hope you learn one or two things that you were able to take back to your classroom as well. Those of you who have joined us for the first time, you've inadvertently taken the first step to become a facilitator. It's fine, Amy. Thank you. I think we all got excited when it was working. So I'm going to share that QR code now below on. And those of you who have joined us now for the first time, it's great to have you here. If you are interested in continuing the journey of becoming facilitators and actually being part of the team that does virtual facilitation, you're more than welcome to send me an email. I'm just going to pop my email address in the chat. So you're welcome to send me an email, and I'll be in contact with you, give you the information. Those of you that are already part of the group, please remember next week, Tuesday, we have a very important meeting. Unfortunately, it's the same time as Louis' presentation on improving your presentation skills. So I'm sure we'll catch up on that recording. Thanks, Louis. So I will see you next week. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please send me an email so that I can send you the invitation that you are able to join us. Right, and with that said, I'm going to wrap up our session. There's the QR code again, our ID key. Please make sure that you fill in the feedback form as well if you've already registered. Same link, scan the QR code, feedback form. You'll see that's the second option on there. I really appreciate if we can the feedback that you give us. I'll just pop the link in the chat again so that you can complete that for us over there. And I'm going to hang around for another minute or two. If you have questions, please ask now. Alternatively, you have my email. You are welcome to send an email to me. I will send you the recording of today's session so that you are able to catch up on anything that you might have missed, or to just refresh your memory on one or two things.